The actual outcome was 4.0%. Again, that signifies that we are not able to meet, but I'll come back to this to explain what was going on. The third objective was the fiscal deficit. The target was to reduce it to 4.8% of GDP. The outturn was that it was even better at 3.6%, meaning that we met this objective. The fourth was domestic revenue. We were to increase to at least 22% of GDP. The outturn was 23.4%, again signifying that we met that target. Domestic borrowing was to be limited to no more than 2.5% of GDP. The outturn was 2.2%, which is again within the target range. Finally, international reserves were to maintain reserves at above 3 months of import cover. The outturn was 4.6 months of import cover. So we met. So 4 of the 6 were met, Chair. Now, the issue, the 2 that were not met, inflation, Chair, the drought that we experienced last year had quite a number of adverse effects. In particular, in our setting, food prices soared. As electricity tariffs had to be adjusted because of the drought. There was not much food on the ground, and that resulted in prices of those commodities going up. The electricity tariffs had to be adjusted upwards to contain the shortages that we are experiencing. In the other aspect which adversely affected the inflation was the behavior of the kwacha in the foreign exchange market. We noted that the kwacha persistently depreciated against major currencies, which pushed up the domestic retail fuel prices and the heightened demand for solid fuels to sustain electricity shortages. The depreciation of the exchange rate was also driven by stronger US dollar and the reduced agricultural production. Going into 2024, now I'm turning to the GDP outturn. The target was to grow the economy at no less than 4.8% as indicated. Chair, the outturn of 4% that we attained, looking at what we had to go through, was actually remarkable. Why do we say that? Well, when we went into 2024, the drought was just emerging. The original revised target was 4%. This was to be changed later because the severity of the drought was taking root. So eventually we reduced it to 2.3% and then further down to 1.2%. Chair, this had quite a lot of implications. I think you saw even in the budgeting process, this came about because with that reduction in projected GDP, it meant that the macro framework we were working with was no longer holding. So there was a lot of pressure on the government to increase the revenue uptake. Why was that? I think it has to be seen in the context of the ECF. This is the extended credit facility that we are following. I think this information is in public domain, where we do the debt restructuring, which meant that we needed to have the debt service to revenue ratio within a certain parameter, in particular 24%. So when this change happened, it meant that it was threatening the debt sustainability analysis that was done. So more revenue measures were needed to bring that to the level that would give us sustained debt position. So these are some of the pressures I think you as honorable members had to go through. But when all said and done, we are happy that actually the economy grew at 4% as reported by Zamstat. This shows that the economy was actually more resilient than we had anticipated. So this has to be really commended. In terms of the fiscal deficit, as indicated, this came out at 3.6%. Which was much lower than was projected. That again speaks to some of the stellar measures that were taken to keep the budget in line. This is one of the areas where for years we had been struggling, but now there seems to be a handle being exerted on the deficit in the economy. We should be seeing dividends later in the period going ahead. In terms of gross international reserves, we are happy there that the volume of reserves increased to $4.3 billion, which is equivalent to 4.6 months of import cover at the end of the year. This is to be compared to last year when we had reserves at 3.3. That was a full 1 billion increase in the gross international reserves. The reasons behind this include the disbursements we got from the IMF in relation to the extended credit facility and the receipts of project funds from the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank. Also with the changes we are making to the statutory reserve ratios, statutory reserves contributed to that. We too were making some purchases as an institution to augment this particular aspect. So we are saying that there we are within the parameters that we set. Turning to the second item that you wanted us to comment on, was on the performance of macro the first quarter of 2025. Chair, what we are saying is that the GDP continued to expand in the first quarter of 2025, growing by 7.9% from 8.6% in the last quarter of 2024. This was much higher than the 2.2% that was recorded in the corresponding quarter of 2024. Strong mining performance and the higher cement production were the key drivers. Inflation slightly declined to 16.5% in March 2025 from 6.7%. It may look trivial, but Chair, the direction is extremely important. But when we compare to the previous period, it was obviously higher. The previous period, it was 13.7%. But I think we are happy that the direction was changing. So what we are saying later actually is that the inflation peaked in the first quarter, as we have seen in the subsequent period.
Still presenting.
Based on tentative quarterly data, lower unrealized cash fiscal deficit of 2.1% of the recorded in the first quarter of 2025, which was 0.9 percentage points lower than the target. So in short, we are saying that we continued to meet the fiscal deficit target. Gross international reserves rose further to 4.5% from 4.3%, which is still obviously gives us 4.6 months of import cover. Turning to monetary policy measures implemented, if any, in 2024 and the first quarter. Chair, given the challenges with inflation that we have alluded to, we had to adjust the monetary policy rate by 300 basis points on a cumulative basis to 14%. In addition, in February, because of the liquidity pressures we are seeing in the foreign exchange market, we had to adjust the statutory reserve ratio by 900 basis points. This became a talking point, but we are coming from the point that if we didn't address the depreciation which was persistent in the kwacha, we were going to end up missing many of these, and it was going to create more problems. So the statutory reserve ratio now stands at 26%. We had actually at that time, honorable members may remember, we had wanted the government also to sweep some of the unutilized balances in the banks, because government money is supposed to be waiting. It's not supposed to be stored. Once you approve, it must go to where it is needed. But that did not work out the way we had anticipated, hence our maintaining this high level of statutory reserves. Not in the paper here, but some other insights we can share, which you see in the annual report that will be presented to you later, is that there were a number of pressures last year relating to external debt restructuring, where with the conclusion of the restructuring with the bond holders, they needed to be paid. So that required government to raise so much money, both in kwacha terms and in foreign exchange. So we had to make some adjustments to make that happen, because the fear was that no sooner have we resolved the external debt issue, we would be faced with the domestic debt crisis. But that, I'm happy to say, that was averted. The other reforms that we made in the year was the introduction of the export proceeds tracking framework. Chair and the honorable members will recall some of the commentaries which were coming in the media, social media, where they say that no, you can't do that because this is that amount to exchange control. But we persisted, and later people realized that those who were against that it was nothing but the right thing to do. So we introduced the export proceeds tracking framework, where exports now are recorded at a local bank here. Previously, if you exported, all you know is that, okay, you have exported, but what happens when you sell those? Where do the proceeds go? So this is something we needed to know, and now we are able to track that. We'll be moving to services and later on to imports as well. We also introduced some measures in the foreign exchange market to guide the operations because of the volatility that we are seeing. One of the measures was to require that the board rates that the banks post on their screens or in their offices must hold. We had come to a situation where those rates did not make much sense because the trading was happening outside those rates. So then we said, what is the point of advertising these if they are not followed? So we had to insist that this be the case. We started out with saying, if one is transacting at $1 million, you don't negotiate the rate, take the rate as given. I'm happy to say that this helped, Chair, but it didn't go far enough. So this year we raised that threshold to $5 million, and we are seeing some of the benefits in that. Then we had other changes in the intermarket foreign exchange market rules to just for orderly conduct in the market. The fourth item was on the financial sector, financial and the first quarter performance. Chair, there we are saying that overall performance and condition of the financial sector was rated satisfactory. This was based on favorable ratings on capital adequacy, asset quality, earnings, and sensitivity to market risk. But as you see in the footnote, Chair, there were some enterprise institutions that we had to take supervisory action on. 9 institutions existed. I am referring to footnote 2 in the paper on page 6. That 5 below the change and 3 microfinance institutions and with 1 leasing institution were exited, but we had the 2 below the change which came in. In the first quarter of 2025, we also took possession of Escoponet Financial Services Limited, which is trading as MyBags due to insolvency. The statement of affairs on the extent of insolvency is currently under review. But on the upside, Chair, is that we to try to deal with the issue of severe drought. We did introduce what we call the Stability and Resilience Facility with an envelope of 5 billion kwacha targeted into agriculture and the energy sector. This was similar to what we had done during the COVID, except this time I think we have lengthened the tenor to 7 years. So we are dispersing this now, this year. We introduced it, but the actual uptake started this year. The fifth item is the remaining quarters, the risks that we are seeing. We generally say, Chair, the prospects are much brighter now. In fact, we will share with you, Chair, if we have not already seen the presentation that we made last week during our monetary policy meeting, because that was also focusing on the first quarter of this year. I think there you note that we see better prospects both for inflation and the growth in general. So I'll not go much further in that because we made a presentation last Friday, so it's still fresh. We hope in the minds of people. But just to say that there are other developments that have happened. The government reforms in ZESCO, I think, are not trivial. The energy sector is allowing the private sector to play directly in that. That's something which was very difficult before, but we hope that this will result in more generation of electricity. We also see that the government has moved in the open access on the Tazama pipeline. That should help also in reducing the prices of petroleum products. That we are hoping would also relieve some of the pressure we have been having in the foreign exchange market. But Chair, looking at the global stage, there are some challenges. Uncertainty has gripped the global economy arising from the policies of the new administration in the US, these tariffs that have been imposed. Our preliminary assessment in our case is that directly they are not very significant because we don't do much trade with the US. It's just about 1%, but it's the relationship with our other trading partners. As you know, one of our major exports is copper, which eventually ends in China. So China is involved in a tussle with these tariffs. But there is a pause now, but still that introduces some uncertainty in the global market. And we see that the inflation is also rising, which means that there could be some tightening of monetary policies in these countries, which has implications, spillover effects in our situation. So this is a watch situation, Chair. In short, we have these positives, but we have to watch the space very carefully to what could come out of that. But that's, I suppose, what life is about. But it's a policy-induced issue. We hope that the discussions with the other countries will help to moderate this. The fifth item was challenges if we first end the 20. Well, I did mention the drought, obviously, which is fresh for you, honorable members. You see it firsthand in your constituencies. So it's really a challenge that we had to face. But we note that this year there's a bumper harvest. I think looking at the numbers, we see that since 1987, this is the highest projected crop output. The nearest it came to was 2021. I think those figures are available from Zamstat. So we feel really energized that the agriculture sector is coming in strongly. We see that there is even still a higher scope for more production in the years ahead. Water levels are also rising, but they are not rising obviously fast enough for electricity generation. But we are hopeful that other alternative sources of power will come in strongly. I think there has been a push to get solar going, to get thermal power going, and the individuals also relieving the pressure on the grid are important developments. But obviously the geopolitical tensions, particularly in the Middle East, are things to be alert to. Likely slow down in China because of these challenges they are facing with their major trading partner, the US. The war in Ukraine is prolonged, so we wait to see what this would happen. Inflation, we had seen that it has moved further away from the target band in 2024, but in the first quarter of this year, when we are doing the assessment, we see that inflation is moving towards the target band. As I said, we'll share the report that the statement and the presentation that we made to the public last Friday. So going forward, Chair, the thing is really we have to continue with the reform agenda, tweaking it where it needs to be tweaked, because if we let go at this critical juncture, then we stand to lose the gains that we have made. In short, we need to consolidate the gains that we have made. Chair, traveling out of the country, those of you who have had the chance, we hear other people, whereas at home we may not quite see the significance of the reforms that we are taking as a country, but others are watching and are making comments to say that what is going on here. During the spring meetings in Washington, we even had a meeting with our colleagues from Argentina who are also making significant reforms, and they are looking at our situations as how are you faring. So we are comparing notes with the other countries to see how we move forward. So I think the chair has been long. Let me pause here and await the questions or some comments from honorable members. Thank you, Chair.
Governor, thank you very much for that presentation. Honorable members, any questions? I see a hand from Honorable Smushi. Any other questions? Honorable Smushi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Governor, for your presentation. I've got two quick questions. The first one is has to do with the resilience of the economy. I wanted to find out what factors led to the resilience of the economy for us to actually move from an anticipated 1.8 growth to 4%. Was it accidental, or maybe there are factors that you can attribute to that? The second one is, given the current economic dynamics, that is both locally and globally, where do you anticipate our inflation sitting by the end of the year? That is, everything else being equal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable Nyirenda.
Thank you so much, Governor, and thank you, Chair. During the period under review, the financial sector continued to exhibit low levels of financial intermediation. The Bank of Zambia has engaged with commercial banks with a view of increasing the contribution of the financial sector to economic growth. The bank implemented a credit guarantee scheme and launched the Stability and Resilience Facility in December last year. Now, the question which I have, how effective are the Stability and Resilience Facility and Credit Guarantee Scheme?
Thank you. Governor, can you respond to those?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Honorable members who have raised the questions. Honorable Smushi, yes, it wasn't by accident as such. I think one of the key drivers is the ICT. I think we tend to look at ICT very casually sometimes. Here we are, Chair, one of the major breakthroughs of ICT. We are having this meeting out here in Abidjan. You are there in Lusaka, others are somewhere. This is a major development. It is contributing to some quality kind of, it's making some qualitative change to how we do things, which helps us to grow. Related to that, the digital financial services has grown significantly in our economy. Then the related sectors have also picked up on that. So it's not really by accident, and the mining also was beginning to make its impact felt. We expect that in this coming year, this year and going forward, they will make some significant contribution. So in short, these reflected the resilience of the economy. I think the interventions also the government provided cushioned the situation such that we were not dropping as it were. So we salute our fellow citizens for being resilient as well, and continuing to forge ahead in spite of the challenges that we are facing. So those are the key factors. I think if you need more, we can provide that at a later stage. But that's what we see as some of the key drivers to the resilience that the economy exhibited. So in short, it wasn't accidental. It had to do with the real developments on the ground. Yes, people may say, but we are not seeing this in terms of the cost of living. I think the two are not exactly the same. In fact, last Friday I was trying to explain that we need to lower the cost of living. We need growth and other positive developments in the economy. Otherwise, we cannot share the poverty that we have. We must grow the economy. That's what will enable us to manage these other very, very essential needs for our economy, for our people. So I just thought I should say that. Then inflation by the end of the year, again, I think the presentation I was referring to give you a clearer view. The projection is that inflation should be on average 13.8% at the end of the year. This is a marked improvement from where it was or where it is at the moment. In fact, our projection is that it could even be surpassed if the issue on maize prices turned out to be different. Here we are making a distinction, Chair, between the policy price and what is the market price on the ground, because the market price is really determined by what is happening. Already we are seeing as a beginning of May to mid-May, people who are selling or trading in maize prices are already hovering around 265 kwacha per 50 kg bag. So it remains to be seen how these turn out. The prices of other agricultural commodities are also coming down. So we are very hopeful that inflation will come down. Obviously, we allude to these other risks, which if they materialize, they could moderate that. But overall, we are bullish in terms of where we think inflation will be. Honorable Nyerenda's question is an important one in the terms of how effective these measures. I think what has to be appreciated that these are but just one little contribution the central bank is making. It's not really taking on the overall responsibility of turning things, but it's a contribution that the bank is making to alleviate some of the hardships that are being experienced. But really, why do we do it? I think on our part, you see, you gave us the mandate by you, I think one of the members, through the people, you speak for the people. You gave the Bank of Zambia the mandate of price and financial system stability. So we are constantly looking at what factors would destabilize the financial sector if we don't address them. So this is why we are talking of this SRF, the Stability and Resilience Facility. It's responding to the shock that we experienced in terms of drought. So the target are enterprises which faced severe challenges, were exposed to the banks and the financial institutions. So if they are not assisted, they are likely to default, and that can lead to instability in the financial sector. The credit guarantee scheme too, it has yet to kick in, I'm afraid, because of the modalities that are still being worked on. But now we have another kind of slight challenge, or not slight, a challenge in that one of the key players we are working with is from the US. Now, with those policy changes in the US, there has to be a recalibration of that. But that is intended to go to SMEs, so that we can't say is effective because it has yet to be implemented. But the SRF is in operation as I speak. I think last week the committee looking into this was making a decision on the disbursements. So there is a lot of interest we saw, particularly enterprises who are involved in agriculture. But we are also edging the energy side part of it. So we don't have figures. Maybe in our next interaction, Chair, would be able to give figures of how the disbursements have come in. There are applications, but the disbursements are only taking effect about now. I hope that helps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll take one from Honorable Jamba and then Honorable Mabumba.
And one from Honorable Mumba.
Honorable Mumba, okay, I didn't realize you were on. So then you Honorable Mumba in that order. Honorable Jamba.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning once more. And good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Honorable.
Thank you. Governor, considering the downside and upside risks, such as improved food and electricity supply, and external pressures from global trade policy and geopolitical tensions, what measures are currently being implemented to return to the targeted ranges? You know those ranges you are talking about. What measures are there?
Thank you. Honorable Mabumba.
Thank you, Chair. Governor, good morning once again. I take you to your presentation on page 7, in which you spoke to the projection for commodity prices, and one of them which is going to be affected is the pricing for copper. Now, Governor, you are aware that copper is one of our major drivers in terms of the 2025 budget. So with that projection in place, what contingency measures is obvious is the Bank of Zambia taking into account so that maybe the adverse effect is not major in terms of our budget performance for 2025? Second, Chair, with your permission, is obvious also on page 2 of your page 3 of your presentation. You alluded to the fact that we did not meet the inflation band of 6 to 8%. And obvious, as a Bank of Zambia, you have taken, some significant measures such as the monetary policy rate. But it appears inflation continues to rise. So in terms of going forward, what do you think should be done, or what measures or what sectors should be reformed so that probably as a country we should be able to rein on the inflation rate? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mumba. Honorable Mumba is also participating virtually. I think we have lost him.
I'm here. Okay. I'm here, Honorable Chairperson.
Okay, please go ahead.
I was saying good morning to you.
Morning.
Chairperson, and to my colleagues, the honorable members. Good morning also, Bank of Zambia Governor. I'll quickly also take you back to the issue of inflation. As you know, Governor, one of the sticky issues that usually happens between the central bank and the government is the issue of agreeing on the inflation rate. And therefore, the central bank needs to be and needs to remain independent. But I wanted to find out from the government side, what are you expecting from them to equally do so that those inflation projections of going downwards can be achieved? And this is also in line to what Honorable Mawumba was talking about. But for me, my main interest is from the government side. What are you expecting? Because from your side, you have been able to provide all the necessary information that government will need to apply for us to make progress on the improvement of our inflation rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor, can you respond to those?
Thank you, the Honorable Chair and the Honorable members. Honorable Jamba, sorry. What measures are we taking to meet the targets? Very poignant point there. You see, what it is that firstly, monitoring these developments is very important. It might look trivial, but it's very important because then you can take action in a timely manner. Now, in terms of GDP, which I think you are talking about earlier on, this is a broader spectrum issue, which really calls on all players, because GDP is a summation of all the little things that each one of us does and adds to that. So what we are saying that, I mean, firstly, the policy environment has to remain stable so that people can go into an area knowing fully well that there will be no policy reversal. Because if there is a policy reversal, it retards progress, because then you are constantly looking over your shoulder. Should I do this? And if I do, would the government change its mind on this? So this sometimes is taken lightly, but those of you honorable members who are involved in business of your own, that's one of the things you take into account before you embark on doing anything. So for example, we have the mining sector now operating. It has taken time for them to start operating. Now, if we came up again and said, no, we are changing this, it disturbs their focus on what they do, because as you know, to get copper out of the ground takes years. It's not a simple matter. So that goes also even in the other areas of our economy, that if the policy environment is not stable, it is not very helpful to that. Apart from that, I think the drive to macroeconomic stability is very, very important, extremely important. The inflation that we are talking about, getting it down to that level, it reduces the tax all of us pay without knowing. When the inflation is high, we are actually being taxed, especially people with fixed incomes. So that's why we come. So we have to continue with those measures to get inflation down. Now, there are two aspects to that. There are issues to do with the demand side, which we can, through our instruments, rein in on by, for example, raising the statutory reserve. It might be hard, but it helps to moderate the impact. But it's on the supply side as well. So what we are seeing in agriculture now is very, very important. So we must build on that. Otherwise, if we relax, saying, well, we are there, we are not there. The 3.65 million tons that we are expecting to is still below our potential. We need to raise our production higher. I'm sure, honorable members, you agree that productivity at a household level is still very low. If you can be producing less than 2 tons of maize per hectare, that's quite low. So we need to continue to press that we can raise that productivity to higher level. In the energy sector, we also need to continue with the reform of ensuring that we get more stable supply of electricity. I'm sure you saw what happened with the load management. That was very, very difficult. That's why people are saying, well, in spite of that, the economy still grew. So what more if you stabilized, for example, electricity generation and supply? So that's very important. In the ICT sector, we equally have to continue to make the progress that we are seeing. So we are talking of improving connectivity across the country. You know, every part of the country must be accessible, must have access to technology, the ICT. So we are engaging with colleagues who are in those areas so that there is better connectivity in the rest of the country. So there are many areas, all these sectors which we need to continue. On the part of the government as well, which goes to what the Honorable Mumba and the Honorable Mabumba was raising, we need to continue with the fiscal discipline. That's a non-negotiable matter. And you may not perhaps realize this, honorable members. For the first time in a long time, Zambia now we have a positive primary balance. That's significant. It shows that there is some budget discipline. You see, in the past, when you have a deficit which is driven by expenditures in areas which are not in the budget is worse. But now we can see that the deficit is being is incurred on the basis of falling short on what you intended to do. But revenue collections can rely on ourselves. You see, the withdrawal of aid by the US and the others, as others have pointed out, including the president, that it's a wake-up call. We cannot continue to depend on others for our own basic needs. That, you see, poverty really strips one's dignity. So we must intensify the measures that we are doing to be able to raise some of the resources that we need to meet our basic needs. Because if we don't, then we remain hostage to others. So all these things, you have seen the government has said, okay, we have the social cash transfer, parts of it is being rolled back, but the cash for work is continuing. This is also recognizing that in this reform effort, there are those among us who are not able to fend for themselves, so government steps in. But for that to work well, we must raise more resources. So we have to continue to find ways of improving the way we raise the resources that we need. I think the smart invoice measure that the ZRA introduced is going to help along this path. We have been paying a lot for things sometimes which are not supplied. So this is something we must all embrace. So the copper prices and the contingent, indeed, I think we raise these matters rightfully so, as the Honorable the Honorable Mavumba is pointing out. Why we bring these up is to give us an indication that these, if they materialize, we must not be taken by surprise. So what others say and do is that in good times, we must have some way of stacking up saving for the rainy day. So this is why fiscal prudence is very important in the period that we have this, because there will come a time when you don't get the resources you have, and then things can be made worse. So for the time being, we still see, yes, we have flagged this risk, but also we are looking at what is happening generally to, for example, copper prices are not so badly affected as is the case for the oil exporting. But see, for us, when oil prices are down, is a plus for us because we are importing. But obviously for exporters, it's an issue. But we have seen that they are shaping up to produce more, which means that we may be seeing these prices coming even lower, which means that with the copper prices where they are, though falling but marginally, it means that our terms of trade are positive. So we must capitalize on this. So investments that we make, public investments, must be such that they yield the results that we need. So the reform effort has to continue to be undertaken to kind of ring fence that. But obviously the demand for copper is likely also to increase, in the sense that if these electric motor vehicles they don't come down, the demand that is. But more importantly, I think, is what we do in value addition. What can we do? I think that agenda must be upped. so that we can add value to our copper, to our other minerals that we are just exporting in raw form. So that agenda of beneficiation should not be relaxed at all. We must also diversify export earnings so that we are not perpetually dependent on the copper. That's the only way we can safeguard our economy. Countries have done that. If you take Mauritius as an example, they used to be primarily dependent on sugar exports, but they have, over the past 15 years, diversified the economy. Sugar is still there, but they have gone into ICT, they have gone into textile, they have gone into financial services. So these are areas also we can make a dent in financial services, in tourism. You saw last year, I think there was quite an improved upturn. So with now the water levels improving, maybe the Victoria Falls would double up in terms of attracting tourists. So we must look into those areas so that we make it easy for people to. So measures business easy must be looked at. Bureaucracy that we talk about is another issue that we need to address. So I hope that it helps on that point. Then on the inflation and the tussle which Honorable Mumbo is refers that usually we don't agree. Well, the thing is that I don't think nowadays you hear as much saying about fiscal consolidation. It's still very, very important, but it's underway. We can see that the efforts are really being made. So we have to stay the course. We have to stay the course that the debt levels do not rise again, to levels that are unsustainable. So we are making progress with the debt restructuring. We should get to a point where, as a country, honorable members, we say, never again. We went through a peak. Now we have this a common framework debt restructuring. These are painful episodes in our lives, but can they be avoided? Absolutely, because they are generated by us not paying attention to what our resource envelope is and how we use the resources that we get. If you invest them wrongly, you don't get the returns. So we will continue urging that we remain very focused on the fiscal prudence and getting the deficit underway, getting the primary balance positive, because that will release resources to the private sector. I think Honorable Nyirenda talked about, she mentioned the financial intermediation. This is one of the things that we are truly indeed concerned, because we see that intermediation, how do we measure it? We measure it if you look at the deposits that you make and what is used out of those deposits for making loans is less than 50%, which means that the bulk of that is sat on. So we are saying that banks must start to lend, but then they'll say, well, the risks are too high. So this is where now we need to attenuate those risks so that they can lend. That's why the credit guarantee scheme actually is meant to try and moderate those risks so that we can be able to do that. But as I said, it has yet to take off. But even the SRF is meant also to moderate those risks. So we'll continue talking about this and doing our part. In the next period, in the period ahead, we are also moving into housing because there's a deficit in housing. Sometimes people say, why are you going to housing? Let's look at it this way. Housing, look at the things that are used in housing. If you are building a house, which I'm sure you all members are all too familiar, you need the roofing sheet, you need the timber, you need the nails, you need all that. So you need the sand, you need cement. All those are different sectors of the economy. So if you really promoted the housing in a proper way, we should see it also contributing immensely to the growth of the economy. So I hope with this insight you will see housing in a different light than you say, no, it's a luxury. No, it's not, because it has these multiplier effects to the rest of the economy if we are doing it properly. I hope I have answered the questions which are raised, the Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. Governor, you have done that. All our members, we have to end. But Governor, as we come to an end, and you indicated so that your constitutional mandate basically is that of promoting price and financial system stability. Now, there have been sentiments from the community that maybe you are not communicating enough this. You know, you do all those monthly policies. Is it quarterly? The MPR,
Yes.
yes, and also sometimes you accompany the Minister of Finance for those town hall meetings. But still more, there have been some concerns from the members of the public that as a bank, you are not doing enough in terms of communicating to the masses on these policies and the projections that you do. Would you want to comment on that, or maybe how would you improve in terms of communication so that you are at the same level with the with everyone in the community?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, for that. Indeed, I think we can't say there is enough communication. As long as people are saying that, that means they are not getting the information. We take that. We are looking at ways of doing, for example, immediately we get back to Lusaka, we will be actually going to Kabwe to engage stakeholders there. So we hope that the members of parliament who are in that area would be able also to join us as we engage the stakeholders, because we'll be going there to explain our decisions that we made, why we stayed the monetary policy rate at 14.5%. So this is in our cards, that every time that we have the monetary policy briefing, generally in Lusaka, we should go out to other parts of the country as well, so that we engage directly with stakeholders. We also intend to improve on the channels that the most people use. So we are happy actually in this instance, Chair, that the Parliament, the TV, they also sometimes tune in so that that message is spread widely. Even the radio, which we are doing, I think we have a presence in literally all the constituencies. So indeed, we will not spare any channel that would help to get the message out. And we also rely on you. You can put a request that, no, can you come? Like we did when we were doing the currency awareness. We went many parts of the country, but obviously as an institution stationed in Lusaka and the Copper Belt, our presence in other parts of the country is very thin. So we have to rely on cooperation of others. I think the media houses and your own offices. So we take the advice and the concerns seriously that the fellow citizens are raising. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, honored members, we need to end here. Governor and your team, thank you for the time that we have had with the committee. Obviously, always we would want to call upon you as and when we have this opportunity of having this kind of interactions. So in terms of the immunity, that which was conferred to you earlier on, that is Cap 12, we do end here. As you travel back, we can only wish you the best as you come back to Zambia. So we end here for today. Have a good day, Governor, with your team. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so very much. We wish you all the very best. Let's continue working together.
God
bless.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. Bank of Zambia Governor, Mr. Danny Kalialia, has made a veto submission to the Planning and Budgeting Committee on the consideration of the budget performance review of the 2024 financial year and first quarter of the 2025. And so keep watching Parliament Television. Shortly, we will cross back to the Planning and Budgeting Committee, and this time around, we expect the Ministry of Energy to make its submission.